My name is Angela, 37 years old, and I used to have an incredible bond with my daughter Sophia. We shared everything until my bitter divorce 8 years ago tore us apart. She chose her father, blocked my number, and vanished from my life. I sent countless messages explaining my side, but she never read them. Now suddenly Sophia has reappeared. Not because she misses me, but because she needs money. The inheritance money. If you've ever had a family relationship fall apart, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Take a second to like and subscribe while I explain how my daughter cut me off, only to return when she needed something from my wallet. I remember the days when we were the picture-perfect family. James and I met in college, fell madly in love, and married right after graduation. I became an accountant while he pursued his career as a software engineer. Our lives seemed blessed when Sophia arrived, completing our little family unit. She was the most beautiful baby with her curious blue eyes and dimpled smile that could melt away any stress from my workday. Our home in the suburbs of Boston was filled with laughter and warmth. Every evening we would gather around our dining table, sharing stories about our day. Weekends were sacred family time, whether we were hiking through the nearby state park, baking cookies together in our kitchen, or simply curled up on the couch watching animated movies. Sophia would always sit between us, her small hands holding onto both of us, creating this perfect physical connection that symbolized our family bond. My mother lived just 20 minutes away and adored her only granddaughter. She would visit every Sunday, bringing homemade apple pie that Sophia would devour within minutes. My mother had inherited substantial wealth from her parents, who had invested wisely in real estate decades ago. Though she lived modestly, everyone knew she had set aside significant trusts for both me and eventually Sophia. "Family is everything," my mother would say, rocking Sophia to sleep. "Money comes and goes, but the love between mother and daughter is unbreakable." How painfully ironic those words would become. When Sophia turned 7, we threw an elaborate birthday party with a fairy tale theme. I spent weeks planning every detail, from the castle cake to the princess costumes. James hired a professional photographer to capture every moment. Looking back at those photos now brings both joy and unbearable pain. There we were, smiling broadly, looking like we had everything figured out. "Mommy," Sophia said that night as I tucked her in, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you." She wrapped her little arms around my neck, and I felt that surge of love that only a mother can understand. It was moments like these that defined me, that made every sacrifice worthwhile. Our summer vacations were adventures we planned together as a family. We created a tradition of visiting a new national park each year. Sophia collected postcards from each destination, carefully documenting our journeys in a scrapbook. By age 10, she had filled 3 books with memories, ticket stubs, and pressed flowers. She was methodical, and creative traits she inherited from both James and me. "We should open a travel agency when I grow up," she once suggested during our trip to Yellowstone. "You can handle the money, Dad can build the website, and I can plan the perfect trips for families." James and I exchanged glances, both of us swelling with pride at her entrepreneurial thinking. As the years passed, our home became the gathering place for Sophia's friends. I would prepare snacks and listen to their giggles emanating from her bedroom. The other parents would comment on how welcoming our home felt, how balanced and loving our family appeared. If only they could see beneath the surface. Because beneath our seemingly perfect exterior, tiny cracks were beginning to form. James was staying later at the office, claiming big projects and increased responsibilities. At first, I believed him, supported him, and made excuses for his absence at dinner tables and school events. After all, his career was thriving, and our financial security was important for Sophia's future. Our arguments, though infrequent, began to take on a different tone. They were no longer about household responsibilities or parenting decisions, but seemed to touch on deeper disconnects. We were careful to keep these tensions away from Sophia, maintaining the illusion of harmony. When she would ask why Daddy missed her soccer game, I would manufacture excuses about important meetings, never letting her see my growing concerns. My mother noticed the change before I fully admitted it to myself. "Are you and James doing all right?" she asked one afternoon while Sophia was at school. "You seem to be carrying this family on your shoulders alone lately." I dismissed her concerns, unwilling to acknowledge the growing distance between my husband and me. The financial aspect of our marriage had always been somewhat complicated. While James earned a good salary, my family's wealth created an unspoken imbalance. We maintained separate accounts alongside our joint one, and my mother had established a college fund for Sophia that had grown substantially over the years. There was also the understanding that someday a significant inheritance would come Sophia's way. James never directly expressed resentment about my family's money, but occasionally comments would slip out. "Must be nice not to worry about retirement," he once said after a discussion with my mother about her investments. I brushed it off, but the comment lingered uncomfortably. Looking back, I should have recognized the signs, the mysterious text messages he would quickly hide when I entered the room, the new cologne, the sudden interest in his appearance, the defensive reactions to innocent questions about his day. But when you are in it, when you are trying to hold a family together, you can become willfully blind to the obvious. I believed we were just going through a rough patch. All marriages did right. We would find our way back to each other. We had to for Sophia, for the life we had built together, for the promises we had made. How wrong I was. How devastatingly wrong. The first undeniable crack appeared on a rainy Tuesday in April. Sophia had a school concert where she was performing a piano solo. We had practiced for weeks, her small fingers becoming more confident on the keys. James had promised to be there, had marked it in his calendar, had even mentioned buying flowers to present to her afterward. But as the auditorium filled with proud parents, the seat next to me remained conspicuously empty. I kept checking my phone, sending messages that remained unanswered. Sophia's eyes scanned the crowd as she took her seat at the piano, her expression falling slightly when she realized her father wasn't there. She played beautifully despite the disappointment, and I cheered loudly enough for two parents. After the show, she asked the inevitable question, "Where's Dad?" "Something must have come up at work," I said, hating the lie but hating the alternative more. "He'll be so sad he missed your performance. We'll record you playing at home." That night, James came home after midnight smelling of alcohol and an unfamiliar perfume. When confronted, he claimed a work dinner had run late, that a female colleague had spilled her drink on him. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But the next day, I did something I had never done before. While James was showering, I checked his phone. What I found shattered any remaining illusions. Hundreds of messages between him and someone named Cassandra, an interface designer at his company. Messages describing secret meetings, intimate moments, and plans for their future. I felt physically ill sitting there with his phone in my trembling hands, reading exchanges that dated back nearly 6 months. 6 months of deception. 6 months of betrayal. 6 months of our family life being a carefully constructed lie. When James emerged from the shower, I was waiting, his phone in my hand, tears streaming down my face. "How could you?" was all I could manage. What followed was an ugly, painful confrontation. James was initially defensive, then angry at my invasion of privacy, as if that were the real crime. Finally, when he realized there was no way to deny the evidence, he became coldly pragmatic. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Angela," he said, his voice eerily calm. "But Cassandra understands me in ways you never have." "What about Sophia?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Does Cassandra understand what this will do to our daughter?" Neither of us had noticed Sophia standing in the hallway, awakened by our raised voices. Her small face was a mask of confusion and fear, her stuffed rabbit clutched tightly against her chest. "Why are you fighting?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. That moment, seeing her there, witnessing the unraveling of her secure world, remains one of the most painful memories of my life. James and I immediately stopped arguing, both moving toward her with reassurances that everything was fine, that grown-ups sometimes disagree. We guided her back to bed together, a final act of united parenting that felt like a cruel performance. Once she was asleep, the conversation continued in harsh whispers. "I want to try to fix this," I pleaded. "For Sophia. We should see a counselor." James agreed, though I now realize it was merely to appease me. We attended 6 sessions over the next month, but his heart wasn't in it. He went through the motions, saying the right things in the therapist's office, but continuing his relationship with Cassandra behind my back. The final breaking point came when I discovered he had taken Sophia to lunch with Cassandra, introducing her as Daddy's friend from work. The betrayal of including our daughter in his deception was too much to bear. When I confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he announced he was moving out, that he needed space to figure things out. 3 days later, he packed his bags while Sophia was at school, promising to explain everything to her himself. That evening, sitting Sophia down to tell her that her father would be living somewhere else was excruciating. At 11 years old, she was old enough to understand the concept of divorce, but too young to comprehend the complexities of adult relationships and betrayal. "Is it because of me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart, absolutely not," I assured her, holding her close. "Sometimes adults change and grow apart. But both your dad and I love you more than anything in the world. That will never change." James kept his promise to maintain his relationship with Sophia. The custody arrangement gave him weekends and Wednesday dinners. At first, these transitions were awkward but civil. I made every effort to facilitate their relationship, believing that despite his failures as a husband, Sophia needed her father. But something shifted after about a month. Sophia began returning from her visits with strange questions and misconceptions. "Dad said you were the one who wanted the divorce," she said one Sunday evening. "He said you found someone else." I was stunned. "That's not true, Sophia. That's absolutely not what happened." She shrugged, unconvinced. "Dad wouldn't lie to me." This was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, Sophia became increasingly distant and suspicious of me. When I tried to discuss what James was telling her, she would shut down or become defensive. "Dad says you're just jealous because he's happier now," she said after one particularly difficult weekend. "He says you want to turn me against him." I called James, furious about his manipulation of our daughter. His response was cold. "I'm simply telling her my truth, Angela. You have your version of events and I have mine." The situation deteriorated rapidly. James began forgetting to return Sophia on Sunday evenings, keeping her until Monday morning and causing her to miss school. When I objected, he accused me of being rigid and controlling. I consulted with my lawyer, who advised caution. Fighting James could escalate the conflict and potentially traumatize Sophia further. The court tended to favor maintaining relationships with both parents unless there was evidence of abuse. So I tried a different approach. I suggested family therapy for the three of us, hoping a professional could help clarify the situation. James refused, claiming I was trying to medicalize normal family adjustments. Meanwhile, Sophia's behavior at home became increasingly troubling. She began questioning everything I said, treating my simplest statements with skepticism. She became secretive about her time with her father, changing the subject whenever I asked what they had done together. The final straw came when I discovered James had taken Sophia to meet his parents without informing me. His family had never approved of me, finding me too independent and not family-oriented enough. Now they were actively participating in the campaign to alienate my daughter. When Sophia returned from that visit, she was clutching an expensive new tablet. "Grandma and Grandpa gave it to me," she explained. "They said you probably wouldn't let me have one because you're so strict with money, even though you come from a rich family." I was speechless. The systematic effort to portray me as the villain was expanding beyond James to include his entire family. And with each gift, each whispered criticism, each manipulated story, they were winning my daughter's allegiance. The situation reached a breaking point when Sophia came home from a weekend visit and announced that her father had told her the truth about the college fund. "Dad said you're keeping all the money Grandma set aside for my education." She accused, her young face twisted with anger. "He said you're probably spending it on yourself." This was an outright lie. The college fund was in a trust that neither James nor I could access. It was solely for Sophia's education, with my mother as the trustee. "That's not true," I said, struggling to remain calm. "The money is in a trust. I couldn't access it even if I wanted to." "You're lying," Sophia shouted. "Dad showed me the papers." I later learned that James had shown her some unrelated financial documents telling her they proved I had taken control of her college fund. It was a deliberate deception designed to destroy her trust in me. The next day, Sophia announced she wanted to live with her father full-time. At 12 years old, the court would take her preference into serious consideration. "He understands me," she said, parroting words I suspected came directly from James. And he doesn't lie to me like you do. I fought the change in custody, but James had laid his groundwork well. He presented himself as the more stable parent willing to put Sophia's needs first, while painting me as bitter and vindictive. The judge, seeing Sophia's clear preference, ruled in his favor, granting me only limited visitation. The day Sophia packed her things to move permanently to her father's apartment was the darkest of my life. She was cold and distant, treating me like an adversary, rather than the mother who had lovingly raised her for 12 years. "I'll come to pick you up on Wednesday for dinner," I said, fighting back tears as James waited in the car outside. "Whatever," she replied, not meeting my eyes. Then she was gone. But the worst was yet to come. 2 days later, I discovered Sophia had blocked my number. My emails went unanswered. When I drove to James's apartment for my scheduled visitation, no one answered the door. I was systematically being erased from my daughter's life, and there seemed to be nothing I could do to stop it. The campaign to alienate me from my daughter escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. James's family joined in wholeheartedly spreading rumors throughout our social circle that I had been unfaithful, that I had abandoned my family for a more exciting life, that I was mentally unstable. Former friends began avoiding me, unsure what to believe, but unwilling to be caught in the crossfire. James manipulated the narrative skillfully. He portrayed himself as the wounded parent who had to step up when I supposedly checked out of our family life. He told Sophia elaborate stories about arguments we had never had, decisions I had never made. Each fabrication was designed to paint me as selfish, uncaring, and ultimately unworthy of her love. The most painful part was knowing that Sophia, at her young age, had no way to discern truth from manipulation. She was naturally inclined to believe her father, especially when his stories were reinforced by his parents and the material comforts they provided. My attempts to communicate with my daughter grew increasingly desperate. I sent text messages every day, knowing they were probably not being read. "Good morning, sweetheart. I miss you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day at school. I saw a dog today that looked just like the one you always wanted. It made me think of you. Your favorite ice cream place has a new flavor. I wish we could try it together." I wrote emails explaining what really happened in our family, careful not to disparage her father, but trying to gently correct the misinformation she had been fed. I sent cards for every holiday and birthday, each one returned unopened. I left voicemails that likely went unheard. "Sophia, please just give me 5 minutes. Please let me tell you my side. I have never stopped loving you, not for 1 second." I hired a lawyer to enforce my visitation rights, but James always had an excuse. Sophia was sick. She had an important school project. She was away with his parents. When we finally managed to get a court date, Sophia herself testified that she didn't want to see me, that being forced to spend time with me was causing her anxiety and affecting her schoolwork. Looking at my daughter on the witness stand repeating words that I knew had been carefully rehearsed with her father, I felt a pain so profound it was physical. The judge, seeing her distress, modified the visitation agreement to, at Sophia's discretion, essentially eliminating my legal right to see my child. As the months turned into years, my efforts to reach Sophia continued unabated. On her 13th birthday, I waited outside her school with a gift, only to have her walk past me without a word, climbing into James's waiting car. On Christmas, I left presents on their doorstep that were never acknowledged. I knew James was taking her on lavish vacations, buying her expensive clothes and electronics, letting her have freedoms I would have considered inappropriate for her age. His parents purchased her a car for her 16th birthday 2 years before she could legally drive it. Everything was designed to create a contrast, the fun, generous father versus the strict, withholding mother she barely remembered. The financial manipulation was particularly insidious. James continuously told Sophia that I was hoarding money meant for her, that I was using her college fund for my own purposes. The truth was that my mother, seeing the situation unfold and heartbroken for both her daughter and granddaughter, had adjusted her will and financial arrangements. The college fund remained intact, but additional assets were placed in trusts that James could not access with me as the trustee. This decision, made to protect Sophia's financial future, was twisted by James into proof of my greed. Meanwhile, I was drowning in grief. The pain of losing a child who is still alive, who has chosen to erase you from their life, is a unique form of torment. I fell into a deep depression, barely functioning at work, isolating myself from what remained of my social circle. It was my mother who finally intervened with tough love. "Angela," she said during one of my lowest points, "you cannot let this destroy you. Sophia will need you someday, and you must be strong enough when that day comes." Her words became my lifeline. I sought professional help, beginning therapy with a counselor who specialized in parental alienation. I joined support groups for parents in similar situations, finding solace in the knowledge that I wasn't alone, that others had walked this path, and some had eventually reconnected with their children. Dr. Lisette Bryant. My therapist helped me understand that healing had to begin with accepting what I could not change. "You cannot control James's actions or Sophia's beliefs right now," she explained. "But you can control how you respond to this pain, how you rebuild your life." Following her guidance, I began the slow process of reclaiming my identity beyond motherhood. I focused on my career, earning a promotion to senior accountant. I took classes in financial planning, expanding my professional skill set. I volunteered at a local women's shelter, finding purpose in helping others who were experiencing their own forms of loss and trauma. When my company announced they were opening a new office in Colorado, I made the difficult decision to relocate. Staying in Boston, where every street corner held memories of Sophia, was keeping me tethered to grief. The move would give me physical and emotional distance, while still allowing me to be reachable if Sophia ever changed her mind. The mountain views and crisp air of Denver became the backdrop for my reinvention. I purchased a small but comfortable condo, adopted a rescue dog named Bandit, and gradually built a new social circle. I continued sending messages to Sophia less frequently, but still regularly updating her about my new life, and always ending with the same sentiment: "My door and heart remain open to you always." Through social media, I could glimpse fragments of Sophia's life: her high school graduation trips to Europe with James's parents, her acceptance to UCLA. I never commented or engaged, respecting the boundaries she had established, but those glimpses both comforted and pained me. She was growing into a beautiful young woman, but I was missing all of it. My professional life flourished in unexpected ways. A client impressed with my financial planning skills offered me a position as the CFO of their tech startup. The role came with significant equity in the company, which unexpectedly increased in value when we were acquired by a larger corporation 3 years later. Suddenly, I found myself with substantial wealth of my own making, separate from my family's money. Throughout these changes, my mother remained my rock, visiting me in Colorado several times a year. During one such visit 5 years after the move, she shared concerning news about her health. "It's cancer," she said with characteristic directness, "and it's aggressive." The next 8 months were devoted to her care, traveling between Denver and Boston for treatments, hoping for a miracle that never came. On a quiet Sunday morning, with me holding her hand, my mother slipped away. Her passing brought dual griefs: the loss of my strongest supporter, and the knowledge that Sophia had lost her grandmother without reconciliation. I sent a message informing her of the funeral arrangements, but received no response. Whether she attended the service I couldn't say, as hundreds of people came to pay their respects, and I was too overwhelmed to register every face. What I did know was that my mother, always practical, had updated her will before her illness. She left the bulk of her estate to me, with specific trusts established for Sophia's education and future. The structure ensured that James could not access these funds, which would become available to Sophia directly at age 25, unless released earlier for education with my approval as trustee. As my grief for my mother slowly transformed into a gentler sadness, I continued building my new life. I started a small foundation in my mother's name, providing scholarships for young women pursuing careers in finance. I dated occasionally, but never found a connection that felt worth pursuing seriously. Bandit and my close friends became my family, imperfect but genuine. And always in the background was the hope that someday, somehow, my daughter would find her way back to me. That hope, sometimes faint but never extinguished, kept me sending birthday cards, kept me maintaining a room for her in my home, kept me documenting my life in messages she might never read. I am here. Those messages said in 100 different ways. I have always been here. 7 years and 8 months after Sophia walked out of my life, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was preparing dinner with the cooking show I barely watched providing background noise. Bandit was sprawled across the kitchen floor, hoping for dropped morsels. "Hello, this is Angela," I answered, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I chopped vegetables. The silence on the other end lasted just long enough for me to think it was a robocall. Then a voice I would have recognized anywhere said, "Mom." The knife clattered to the cutting board. "Sophia." My voice barely functioned, my throat suddenly tight. "Is that you?" "Yeah." Another pause, heavy with 7 years of absence. "How are you?" Such a mundane question, as if we had spoken last week instead of last decade. I sank into a kitchen chair, motioning for Bandit to stay down when he perked up at my distress. Words failed me. How could I possibly summarize these years of grief, rebuilding, and resilience in a casual response? "I'm okay. Better for hearing your voice. How are you?" "I'm good," she said, her tone guarded. "Finishing up at UCLA, psychology major." "Psychology, that's wonderful." I had known about UCLA from social media, but not her field of study. "You always were insightful about people." The conversation continued awkwardly, with surface-level exchanges that carefully avoided the gaping wound between us. She asked about my job, my move to Colorado. I asked about her classes, her friends. Neither of us mentioned James. Then, after about 10 minutes of this strained small talk, she said, "I heard about Grandma. I'm sorry I didn't come to the funeral." "She would have understood," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. My mother had been deeply hurt by her inability to maintain a relationship with her only grandchild. "Dad told me it was just family," Sophia continued, a hint of accusation in her tone. "I found out later that wasn't true." This was the first indication that perhaps James's narrative was beginning to unravel in her mind. I chose my response carefully. "There were announcements in the papers and online. Everyone who loved her was welcome." Another silence fell, this one tenser than before. I waited, sensing she was working up to something. "The thing is," she finally said, "I've been trying to arrange my graduate school plans. I got accepted at Columbia for their clinical psychology program." "That's incredible, Sophia. Congratulations." Pride surged through me, along with sadness for all the achievements I had missed celebrating with her. "Thanks." She paused again. "But there's an issue with tuition. Dad said he would handle it, but now he's saying he can't." The picture was becoming clearer. "I see. He told me all these years that you were controlling Grandma's money, that you took my college fund. But now he's saying there isn't any money left for grad school, that he used it all for my undergrad." Her voice hardened. "He's been lying to me, hasn't he?" 1,000 responses flashed through my mind. I could tell her exactly how James had manipulated her, detail every lie, unleash 7 years of pent-up explanations. Instead, I took a deep breath. "Your college fund is intact," I said calmly. "Your grandmother ensured that. There are additional funds available for graduate school if that's what you choose to pursue." "Why didn't you tell me?" The accusation was clear in her voice. "Sophia, I've been trying to tell you many things for 7 years. Every email, text, letter, and voicemail I sent went unanswered. You blocked me from your life." "Because I thought you abandoned us. Dad said you chose your career over family, that you resented having a child, that you were just waiting for an excuse to leave." Her voice cracked, raw emotion breaking through the careful facade. My heart ached for the confused child she had been, for the years of manipulation she had endured. "None of that was true. Not a word of it." "Then what happened?" she demanded. "Why did you and Dad split up?" It would have been easy to tell her everything then, to lay out James's betrayal in explicit detail. But despite everything, I still didn't want to destroy her relationship with her father. She would need time to process the truth without feeling forced to choose sides again. "Your father and I had issues that became insurmountable," I said carefully. "But my love for you never wavered. not for a single day. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, uncertain. Can we meet somewhere to discuss the money for Colombia? The request stung the reduction of our reunion to a financial transaction. But it was an opening, the first she had offered in nearly 8 years. Of course, I agreed. I'm in Boston this month for business. We could meet wherever you're comfortable. We arranged to meet at a cafe near her apartment 2 days later. As we ended the call, I found myself shaking with adrenaline and emotion. Bandit nuzzled my hand, sensing my distress. She called. I told him, tears finally breaking free. She actually called. That night, I barely slept, replaying the conversation, imagining our meeting, trying to prepare for every possible scenario. By morning, I had made a decision. I would not simply hand over money and watch her disappear again. This time, there would be conditions. The cafe she had chosen was a trendy place near campus filled with students hunched over laptops. I arrived early, selecting a quiet corner table with enough privacy for what promised to be an emotional conversation. When Sophia walked in, the sight of her nearly took my breath away. Gone was the child I had last seen. In her place stood a poised young woman with my mother's eyes and posture. Her hair was shorter than in her social media photos, cut in a stylish bob that framed her face. She spotted me immediately, a flicker of something like recognition, then hesitation crossing her features before she approached. "Hi," she said, standing awkwardly before the table. "Hello, Sophia." I resisted the overwhelming urge to embrace her, sensing it would not be welcome. "Please sit down." She slid into the chair opposite me, setting her bag beside her like a barrier. Up close, I could see the tension in her jaw, the careful neutrality she was trying to maintain. "Would you like something to drink?" I offered. "They make excellent lattes here." "How would you know?" she asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. "You've never been to LA before." "I've visited several times, actually," I replied calmly. "I never approached you because I was respecting the boundaries you established, but I wanted to be near just in case." This information seemed to surprise her. She absorbed it silently before ordering a chai latte from the passing server. I requested a simple black coffee. Once our drinks arrived, Sophia got straight to the point. "Dad says he can't help with Colombia. He says there's no money left." "That's not entirely accurate," I said carefully. "Your father was never in control of your educational funds. Your grandmother established those trusts, and I am the trustee." "So you did have my money," she said accusingly. "I didn't have it, Sophia. I was protecting it for you as your grandmother intended. I couldn't access it for personal use even if I wanted to, which I never did." She frowned, processing this information against years of contrary messaging. "Then why did Dad say you took it?" This was the moment of truth, literally. "Before I answer that, I have a condition for releasing the funds for Colombia." Her expression immediately hardened. "A condition? So you are controlling the money." "Not controlling it, ensuring it's used as intended, which is my responsibility as trustee." I met her gaze steadily. "My condition is simple. I want you to read the messages I've been sending you for the past 8 years." "What messages? I never got any messages from you." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "These are printouts of every text, every email, every letter I sent you since the day you left. There are hundreds of them. Read them and then we can discuss Colombia." She stared at the envelope, conflict clear on her face. "You expect me to believe you've been trying to contact me all this time? Dad said you never even tried." "That's why I'm asking you to read these," I said gently. "Not to believe me, but to see for yourself." Reluctantly, she took the envelope, setting it on the table without opening it. "And if I read these, you'll release the money. If you read them and still want to move forward with Colombia, yes, I'll release the funds. Your education was always a priority for your grandmother and me." She nodded slowly, then surprised me by opening the envelope right there in the cafe. She pulled out the first few pages, which contained screenshots of text messages from the initial months after our separation. Messages full of love explanations, pleased to talk. "I never got these," she said, her voice small. "My number didn't change." "I know," I replied softly. "I sent them anyway, hoping somehow they'd get through." As she read more, her expression shifted from skepticism to confusion. She paused on a particular message dated about 6 months after she left. I saw your performance in the school play on YouTube. You were magnificent as Juliet. I wish I could have been there to tell you in person how proud I am. She looked up, eyes wide. You saw that? I found ways to keep up with your life, Sophia. I never stopped being your mother even when you stopped being my daughter. She flinched at that but continued reading. With each page, her composure cracked further. By the time she reached the emails explaining what actually happened between James and me, tears were streaming down her face. Dad said you didn't want custody, she whispered. He said you were relieved when I chose to live with him. Nothing could have been further from the truth, I replied, my own eyes filling with tears. Losing you was like having my heart torn from my chest. I fought for you until the court told me I had to respect your wishes. She set down the papers, visibly overwhelmed. There are so many messages here. Years' worth. Every week, sometimes every day. Even when I got no response, I kept writing. I wanted you to know whenever you were ready to hear it that I never stopped loving you, never stopped waiting for you. Sophia wiped her eyes, attempting to regain composure in the public setting. I need time to process this. Of course, I agreed. Take all the time you need. She carefully returned the papers to the envelope. About Columbia? The funds will be available, I assured her, regardless of what you decide about. I gestured between us, unable to name the fragile possibility of reconciliation. She nodded, gathering her belongings. But instead of leaving immediately, she hesitated. There's something else you should know. Dad's been having financial problems for years now. His company downsized and he made some bad investments. That's why he can't help with Columbia. It's not just about the trust funds. This information didn't surprise me. James had always been impulsive with money, confident that his next venture would be the one to pay off big. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. That must be difficult for both of you. Sophia's expression darkened. He told me 2 days ago that he used my college money to invest in a friend's startup that failed. That's when I decided to call you. The implication was clear necessity, not desire, had prompted her reaching out. I tried not to let the hurt show on my face. I understand, I said quietly. But I'm glad you did, regardless of the reason. She stood to leave, clutching the envelope. I'll read these and I'll call you. I'll be in Boston for 2 more weeks, I told her. Take your time. As she walked away, I remained at the table, emotions turbulent. It wasn't the reunion I had dreamed of for 8 years, but it was something. A crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. True to my word, I didn't contact her after our meeting. The ball was in her court now. 3 days passed with no word, then 4, then 5. I focused on my business meetings, trying not to check my phone every few minutes, trying not to hope too intensely. On the 6th day, as I was preparing to return to my hotel after dinner, my phone rang. Sophia's number. Can we meet tomorrow? She asked without preamble when I answered. There are things I need to ask you. We arranged to meet at the public garden neutral ground with the privacy that our conversation would require. When I arrived the next morning, she was already there, sitting on a bench near the duck pond, the manila envelope in her lap. I read everything, she said as I sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. 3 times. And, I prompted gently when she didn't continue. I talked to Dad after our meeting, she said, her gaze fixed on the water. I asked him about the messages, about why I never received them. He said you must have fabricated them recently. My heart sank. Of course James would continue his manipulation. But then, Sophia continued, I checked the email account he set up for me when I was 12, the one I stopped using in high school. There were hundreds of emails from you, all marked as read, but I never saw them. And when I checked my phone settings, I found out he had set up filters to automatically delete texts from your number. The deliberate, sustained effort to erase me from her life was staggering. I'm so sorry, Sophia. Don't apologize. Her voice was firm. You're not the one who should be sorry. She finally turned to face me. He lied to me, for years, about everything. Your father made choices I don't understand and can't defend, I said carefully. But he's still your father. A father who used my college money without permission, who deliberately kept me from my mother, who told me you abandoned us when you were sending messages every week. Her voice rose with each question, years of suppressed anger finding its target, even if that target wasn't present. I confronted him yesterday, she continued, showed him the printouts, asked him to explain. Know what he said, that it was for my own good, that you would have poisoned me against him if he'd let me read your messages. She laughed bitterly. As if he wasn't poisoning me against you all along. I remained silent, letting her process her feelings without interruption. There's something else, she said after a moment. I found emails between him and his parents discussing their strategy for keeping me away from you. They planned everything, Mom. The gifts, the vacations, the stories about you. It was all calculated. The confirmation of what I had suspected but could never prove hit hard. They thought they were protecting you, I offered, though the words sounded hollow even to me. No, Sophia shook her head firmly. They were punishing you, and using me to do it. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. I want to know everything now, the real story, from the beginning. So there on a bench in the Boston Public Garden, with ducks quacking nearby and joggers passing at regular intervals, I told my daughter the unvarnished truth about the dissolution of her parents' marriage. I told her about James's affair, his gaslighting, the custody battle, and my subsequent depression and recovery. I showed her pictures from my life in Colorado, introduced her to Bandit through photos on my phone, told her about the foundation I had started in my mother's name. In turn, she filled in the 8-year void in my knowledge of her life. Her struggles in high school, feeling pressured to maintain the image of perfection her father and grandparents expected. Her rebellion in small ways, including her choice of psychology as a major when they had pushed for business. Her growing suspicions in recent years that her father wasn't being entirely truthful, especially about financial matters. I used to dream about you, she confessed quietly. Even after I convinced myself you didn't care. I'd dream you were trying to reach me, trying to explain, but I couldn't hear you. She smiled sadly. I guess my subconscious knew something I didn't. As the morning stretched into afternoon, we moved from the bench to a nearby restaurant, continuing our conversation over lunch. The initial awkwardness gradually gave way to cautious connection moments of shared laughter, interspersed with tears and difficult revelations. What happens now? She asked as we prepared to leave the restaurant. With Columbia, with everything. The funds for Columbia will be transferred next week, I assured her. As for everything else, that's up to you. I've missed 8 years of your life, Sophia. I would like the chance to be part of it going forward, but I understand if you need time. She was quiet for a moment, considering. I want to try, she said finally. I can't promise it will be easy. There's a lot of hurt on both sides. But I want to know my mother. It was more than I had dared to hope for. That's all I ask, a chance to try. We parted with a tentative hug, the first physical contact in 8 years. It was brief and somewhat stiff, but it was a beginning. The next day, Sophia called again, this time to ask if I would join her for dinner at her apartment. She wanted to cook for me, she said, to show me her life in a more personal way. I accepted immediately, bringing a bottle of wine and flowers, feeling oddly like I was going on a first date, rather than visiting my own daughter. Her apartment was small but tastefully decorated with bookshelves full of psychology texts and framed art on the walls. As she moved around the kitchen preparing pasta, I noticed a familiar object on her desk. You kept it, I said softly, approaching the worn, stuffed rabbit that had been her constant companion as a child. Mr. Whiskers. She glanced over, a flash of vulnerability crossing her features. He was the one thing I couldn't leave behind. Dad wanted me to get rid of him when I was 15, said I was too old for stuffed animals. But I couldn't do it. The rabbit had been a gift from me on her 5th birthday. That she had held on to it through everything felt significant, a tiny thread of connection that had never completely severed. Over dinner, our conversation turned to the future. I extended an invitation for her to visit Colorado over her upcoming break. She accepted expressing interest in seeing my life there, meeting Bandit, hiking the trails I had described. And the money situation, she said, setting down her glass. I appreciate you handling Columbia, but I don't want to just take from you after all this time. It doesn't feel right. The money is yours, Sophia, I assured her. Your grandmother always intended it for your education. Still, she insisted. I want to earn my own way as much as possible. I've applied for teaching assistantships and research positions for the fall semester. Her independence and integrity despite James's influence made me profoundly proud. You are so much like your grandmother, I told her. She valued education above almost everything else. Sophia smiled sadly. I wish I had known her better. Dad limited our contact after the divorce, said she was interfering too much. Another relationship that had been damaged by James's manipulation. She kept every drawing you ever sent her, I said. Every school photo, every report card. She never stopped loving you even when she couldn't see you. The evening ended with plans for Sophia to help me pack up my hotel room the following day before my flight back to Denver. We would have a few more hours together and then begin the process of rebuilding our relationship long distance until her move to New York for graduate school. As I prepared to leave her apartment, she suddenly asked, "What about Dad? What do I do about him?" It was a complex question with no easy answer. Despite everything James had done, he was still her father, still a part of her life. That's for you to decide, I said carefully. I would never ask you to cut him off the way he asked you to cut me off. That would make me no better than him. She nodded thoughtfully. I'm so angry with him right now. I don't know if I can forgive him. Forgiveness doesn't have to happen overnight, I told her. And it doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It just means not letting the anger control your life. Is that what you did? Forgive him. I considered the question seriously. Not immediately. It took years of therapy and hard work. But eventually, yes. Not for his sake, but for mine. Carrying that much hatred was exhausting. She walked me to the door, hesitating before opening it. Then, in a movement that seemed both impulsive and long overdue, she hugged me properly, holding tight as if afraid I might disappear. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered against my shoulder. I'm so sorry I didn't try to find out the truth sooner. You were a child, I reminded her, returning the embrace with equal fervor. The adults in your life failed you, not the other way around. As I walked back to my hotel that night, the city lights blurred through happy tears. 8 years of pain could not be erased in a few days of reconnection. Trust would take time to rebuild. But the door that had been slammed shut for so long was finally open again, allowing the possibility of healing, of rediscovering the mother-daughter bond that had been so cruelly interrupted. For the first time in nearly a decade, I fell asleep without the ache of absence that had become my constant companion. My daughter was back in my life. Everything else was details. The process of rebuilding a relationship after 8 years of separation is neither quick nor easy. The initial euphoria of reconnection gave way to the hard work of establishing new patterns of communication, navigating lingering hurt, and creating a foundation of honesty where manipulation had once reigned. In the months following our Boston reunion, Sophia and I developed a routine of weekly video calls supplemented by daily text messages about the mundane details of our lives. These seemingly small exchanges, sharing a funny incident at work or commenting on a book we were both reading, gradually stitched together the fabric of our relationship that had been so violently torn apart. Sophia's relationship with her father entered a complicated new phase. After the initial confrontation about his deception, she established firm boundaries limiting contact while she processed her feelings. James, realizing the extent to which his manipulations had been exposed, vacillated between defensiveness and desperate attempts to maintain his position in her life. He keeps sending me gifts, she told me during one of our calls, her frustration evident. As if another expensive handbag could make up for 8 years of lies. That was always his approach, I observed, using material things to create obligations and dependency. I see that so clearly now, she agreed. It's like I was wearing James-tinted glasses my entire adolescence and suddenly they're off. I'm reevaluating everything. Her undergraduate psychology training gave her valuable tools for this reevaluation, allowing her to analyze the dynamics of parental alienation from an academic as well as personal perspective. She even began preliminary work on a research project examining the long-term effects of such manipulation on young adults. My professor thinks it could be developed into a dissertation topic at Columbia, she shared excitedly, using my experience as a jumping-off point for broader research. Finding meaning in the pain, I said. Your grandmother would be incredibly proud. The mention of my mother still brought a shadow of regret to Sophia's expression. I wish I could have seen her one more time, known her as an adult. You honor her memory by pursuing education by seeking truth, I assured her. That's all she ever wanted for you. As promised, I transferred the funds for Columbia into an account Sophia could access. But true to her word about wanting to contribute to her own education, she secured both a teaching assistantship and a position as a research assistant in the psychology department's trauma studies lab, reducing the financial burden significantly. Our first in-person reunion after Boston came when Sophia visited Colorado during her spring break. Watching her step off the plane wheeling a small suitcase and scanning the crowd for my face, I was struck again by the young woman she had become without me. Beautiful, poised with an underlying resilience that perhaps had been forged in the crucible of our separation. Welcome to Colorado, I said as we embraced more naturally than in Boston. Bandit can't wait to meet you. My rescue dog lived up to his reputation for enthusiastic greetings, nearly knocking Sophia over in his excitement when we arrived home. She laughed, kneeling to receive his affection, and in that moment, I glimpsed the joyful child she had once been. The week passed in a blend of outdoor adventures, quiet evenings talking by the fireplace, and introducing Sophia to the life I had built without her. I took her to my office where my colleagues welcomed her warmly, many of them having heard about my long-lost daughter over the years. We hiked mountain trails, Bandit bounding ahead, pointing out landmarks, and sharing the peace I had found in nature. On our third evening as we prepared dinner together in my kitchen, Sophia brought up the subject of therapy. I've been seeing someone, she confessed, chopping vegetables with careful precision. A therapist who specializes in family trauma. I'm glad, I said sincerely. It helped me enormously. She suggested joint sessions. Sophia continued, not meeting my eyes. For us, to help navigate the rebuilding process. I set down the spoon I was using to stir the sauce. I think that's an excellent idea. She looked up, relief evident in her expression. Really? You'd be willing to do that? Sophia, I would do anything to help heal what was broken between us, I assured her, including examining my own role in what happened. Your role, she questioned. You didn't do anything wrong. I failed to protect you from James's manipulation, I said quietly. I didn't find a way to reach you when conventional methods were blocked. There were probably signs before the divorce that I missed ways I could have prepared you better. She shook her head firmly. Mom, you can't blame yourself for not outsmarting a systematic campaign of parental alienation. Dr. Maxwell, my therapist, says what Dad did was essentially a form of emotional abuse of both you and me. The term was harsh but accurate. James had abused his position of trust and authority to manipulate a child's perception to sever a fundamental relationship for his own purposes. Still, I maintained, I want to participate in the therapy. I think it will help us both. We arranged for virtual joint sessions with Dr. Maxwell, establishing a regular schedule that would continue after Sophia returned to California. These professional guided conversations allowed us to address painful topics that might have been too difficult to navigate on our own, creating a safe space to express hurt, anger, and regret. The most significant breakthrough came during our fourth session when Dr. Maxwell asked us each to share what we perceived as the greatest loss resulting from our years apart. I lost the chance to guide my daughter through adolescence, I said, emotion thick in my voice. To help her navigate first heartbreaks, college applications, discovering her passion. I lost thousands of everyday moments that can never be recovered. When it was Sophia's turn, she was quiet for a long moment. I lost the truth, she finally said. about my family, about myself. Everything I thought I knew was filtered through Dad's lies. I built my identity on a foundation of manipulation. Now I have to figure out who I really am. Dr. Maxwell nodded encouragingly. And who do you think that might be, Sophia? My daughter looked directly at me through the screen. Someone who has her mother's strength, she said softly, and hopefully her capacity for forgiveness. As spring turned to summer, Sophia faced the practical challenges of relocating from California to New York for graduate school. Without hesitation, I offered to help with the move, flying to Los Angeles to assist with packing up her apartment and making the cross-country journey. It was during this process that Sophia had her final confrontation with James. He had continued his attempts to re-establish his version of their relationship, alternating between playing the victim and making grandiose promises about financial support he couldn't actually provide. I need to see him one more time before I leave, Sophia told me as we sorted through her belongings. To make my position clear. Would you like me to come with you? I offered. She considered this, then shook her head. No, this is something I need to do alone. But thank you for offering. The meeting took place at a restaurant near James's apartment. Sophia returned to her own place 3 hours later, emotionally drained but resolute. He tried everything, she reported, collapsing onto her couch. Guilt, anger, tears, blame. He even suggested that you had brainwashed me, that I was under your spell somehow. How did you respond? I asked, sitting beside her. I told him that I'm an adult capable of evaluating evidence and drawing my own conclusions. She said, a hint of pride in her voice. I said I wasn't cutting him off completely, but that our relationship would be on my terms from now on. Limited contact, total honesty, and no more manipulation. If he can't accept those conditions, then he doesn't get to be part of my life. I squeezed her hand. That took courage. I learned it from you, she said, returning the pressure. You never gave up on me, even when I gave up on you. That's the kind of strength I want to develop. The drive across the country to New York became an unexpected bonding experience. Confined to a car for days with changing landscapes as our backdrop, we filled in more gaps in our knowledge of each other's lives. I learned about Sophia's first serious boyfriend in college, her brief experimentation with vegetarianism, her volunteer work at a crisis text line. She heard about my disastrous attempt at online dating, my growing collection of houseplants, my dream of someday writing a book about financial independence for women. New York welcomed us with its characteristic energy and noise. Sophia's apartment, secured through Columbia's graduate housing, was small but functional, located in a vibrant neighborhood with easy access to campus. As we unpacked her belongings, arranging books on shelves and hanging artwork on walls, there was a sense of creating not just a new living space, but a new chapter in our shared story. On my last evening before flying back to Colorado, we sat on her tiny balcony watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky. This feels like a proper fresh start, Sophia reflected, nursing a glass of wine. New city, new program, new understanding of my past. New relationship with your mother, I added with a smile. Not new, she corrected gently. Reclaimed, like finding something precious you thought was lost forever. The metaphor was apt. What we were building was neither the exact relationship we had before the separation, nor something entirely new, but a reclaiming of the essential bond between mother and daughter, adapted to who we had become during our years apart. Before leaving the next morning, I gave Sophia a small wrapped package. Inside was a journal with a simple inscription, "For new memories and for processing old ones. With all my love, Mom." She hugged me tightly at the airport security checkpoint. This isn't goodbye, she promised. Just see you soon. Thanksgiving in Colorado, I suggested. I'll be there. She agreed without hesitation. As I flew westward, watching the country unfold beneath the plane, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From that first unexpected phone call to this point of genuine reconnection, we had traversed emotional territory more challenging than any physical distance. There was still work to do, still moments of hurt that would arise unexpectedly, still the shadow of 8 lost years that could never be fully reclaimed. But we had found our way back to each other. Through manipulation, separation, and years of silence, the fundamental connection between mother and daughter had persisted, damaged, but not destroyed. And in that persistence was a profound lesson about the resilience of love, the power of truth, and the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds. If there is one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing harm. It means refusing to let past pain determine your future. It means recognizing that holding on to anger ultimately hurts you more than the person you're angry with. It means choosing freedom over resentment, healing over vindication. Sophia and I will never recover the 8 years that were taken from us. But in rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect, we have created something perhaps even stronger than what was lost. A bond tested by fire and found unbreakable. For those of you who might be experiencing similar pain, who might be separated from someone you love by circumstances that seem insurmountable, I offer this. Don't stop reaching out. Don't stop sending those messages into the void. Don't stop believing that someday, somehow the truth will find its way through the barriers of misunderstanding and manipulation. And if you're the one who has been hurt, who has built walls to protect yourself from further pain, consider whether those walls might also be keeping out the love and connection you deserve. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to give someone the chance to explain, to listen with an open heart to a perspective different from the one you've held as truth. The journey back to each other isn't easy. It requires courage, honesty, and the willingness to be vulnerable in the face of potential rejection. But it is worth every difficult step. Because at the end of that journey is the possibility of wholeness, of understanding, of a love reclaimed from the ashes of misunderstanding. My daughter and I found our way back to each other, and in that reunion we both found pieces of ourselves that had been missing all along. Have you ever experienced a profound misunderstanding that damaged a relationship? How did you work through it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if you found value in our journey, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear that reconciliation is possible, that love can find a way through even the thickest walls of separation. Thank you for witnessing our story, and remember, it's never too late for truth to prevail.